Hello everyone and welcome back to Age of Nagash, which is a channel dedicated to Age of Sigmar. Now, in this video, it's going to be part 3 for the lore of the Flesh Eater Courts in the Age of Sigmar Army Archive. And in this one, we're going to look at the origins for the Flesh Eater Courts, and this, of course, is going to start with the Carrion King. Right, so let's get started. So, from an ancient vampire bloodlines where the original abhorrent kings spawned, shrouded by their king for their cannibalistic ways, they scattered out into the realms, weaving trails of madness through the ruins left by the Age of Chaos, and becoming the first generation of abhorrent ghoul kings. Okay, so this, sheds a bit of light on what it was, how it started. We all know, if you know a bit about fantasy, the abhorrent ghoul kings, the Strigoi bloodline from the vampire counts. And that's obviously how this originated, but in Age of Sigmar, of course, it comes from the Carrion King. And I've sort of explained a little bit how he came about, but we're going to go into more detail about that. But it shows that the abhorrence of the shall we say the different brother from the family of vampires. They're the one that are locked up in the fucking attic or what basement or whatever you want to call it. They're the one that the family is not proud of. And when the family, of course, I mean in vampires in general, they see the abhorrence as not kin, but actually mindless beasties that have lost everything to their madness and disillusion. Okay, and then it says the origins of the abhorrence are an ancient and tragic tale. During the age of myth, the first abhorrent roamed the realms. He had been a favoured servant of Nagash, and back then he was fair and strong. Wherever he travelled, he administrated justice in the name of the great necromancer, building hallowed shrines, dedication to the worship of the god of death, and the glorious mausoleums where departed ancestors could be given their due. He also helped the weak and infirm pass into the underworlds, and took life from tyrants who misused their mortal existence. Before becoming the first abhorrent, the champion was known by many names in many lands. Samurus the Summer King, the Blood Rose Prince, and Eucheron the Handsome, to name but a few. And he was equally loved and feared. Those civilizations that paid their due to Nagash welcomed his coming, and lined their streets with grave roses petals as he walked among them, whereas those who usurped the natural order of life and death were made to feel the full measure of his wrath. Though the truth of his ignominious decline has been lost to the march of time, it is believed by many that the king fell out of favour with Nagash and was punished with his hideous transformation. No longer was he welcomed as a beloved saviour. Instead, he was shunned and even hunted by those empires for whom he had done so much. Malformed and filled with anger against his former master, he became a monster like no other, and began prowling the nightlands of Shaiish. He continued to travel from land to land, but instead of granting boons to the great necromancer's loyal subjects, he offered them only portion of his bitter malice. Such was the devastation spread by his fury that scores of the Nagash's kingdoms were destroyed, their lords slain, their people torn apart, and their cities reduced to naught but ruins and broken corpses. Such an insult could not be borne by Nagash, and so he ordered Mortarchs, most loyal and powerful of his servants, to bring the wayward king to heel. Mortarchs of night, sacrament and blood gathered their unliving armies, and in a series of brutal wars managed to scatter the last of the king's forces. The one known as Eucheron was brought before Nagash, but rather than obliterating his soul, the great necromancer imprisoned his former servant in a prison called the Shroud Cage, a towering edifice of broken promises. Its walls reflected endless untruths upon the king, reducing him to a ravaging wreck, as twisted in mind as he was in body. So the king might have stayed for all eternity, and not the god king Sigmar descended from Azir in the first years of the Age of Chaos. Sigmar invaded the realm of death, incensed by Nagash's perceived betrayal at the All Points. During Sigmar's rampage through the great necromancer's domain, his armies brought down the bastion that held the Shroud Cage, unwittingly allowing the thing that would become known as the Carrion King to scuttle forth from the ruin. Loosed into the shadows, the first abhorrent began to build his court. Once more he found those knights who had survived the wars against Nagash's Mortarchs, those who were still loyal to their sovereign lord, and upon them he bestowed a portion of his grand madness. Before setting out to travel the land once more in his insanity, the Carrion King believed himself the beloved champion he once had been, when in truth he had become more monstrous than ever. Cities of cowering mortals, doomed fortresses of undead warriors, and invading chaos armies all had the abhorrent's kindness visited upon them, and where left broken and butchered, the Carrion King found a willing source of servants among lost and deprived immortal cannibals. And in those times such wretches were plentiful indeed. With his blood he created his own king to sing his praises from the foot of his dark throne. Many of these in turn went on to create their own courts. So it is that each flesh-eater court is a reflection of the first court, their abhorrence trying to recreate in madness the memories passed on to them through blood. It was during the same age that Nagash was laid low by Archaon, the ever-chosen of the Chaos Gods. The great necromancer was not destroyed completely, and was spirited away by his Mortarchs to the underworlds of Styx, there to slowly regain his sudded power. Nonetheless, in his absence, the empire of the Carrion King expanded greatly. The abhorrence he created spread throughout Shyish before travelling through the realm gates to found kingdoms in far distant lands. Like all inhabitants of the mortal realms, these courts were set upon by armies of the dark gods, but where most civilizations crumbled to dust under the relentless advance of chaos, the flesh-eaters thrived. For every army of Mordants that were hacked apart or set ablaze by indolent warriors, and more were raised from the pitiful masses that had been left to wither and die in the ruins of once glorious cities. United by the madness of an abhorrent, these Mordants turned their hunger into a deadly weapon. During the Age of Chaos, when anarchy and ruination abounded, what few tales were told of the Carrion King came to an abrupt end. Through the influence of his derangement persisted and continued to grow. His whereabouts became completely unknown. More mysterious still are his motives and loyalties, for none can truly say whether the Carrion King continues to rage against Nagash, or if in end his madness he believes himself to be the great necromancer. Good graces, and many of those courts descended from him, fight alongside the undead armies of the Mortarchs, but others attack the servants of Nagash on sight. Those who cursed lineage is least removed from the Carrion King still lives within the ruins of the ancient kingdoms, deep within Shyish. In them the curse of the king is strong, and their collective madness feeds off and permeates the land. The further from the ruinous empire their courts stray, the more their delusions diverse from that of the Carrion King, though the degree of their insanity remains undiminished. The full truth of Eucheron's tale has been forgotten by all but one, the great necromancer. Indeed, Nagash remembers well what transpired and still seeks his former champion across the mortal realms. Okay, so that's pretty interesting. So that's the main sort of text we got for the Carrion King. It's quite cool. Like, I gave a little bit of his backstory in the first lore video, I believe. However, it's nice to have it more in detail, because they did mention him in the first Battle Tome, but as far as I remember, it wasn't nearly as detailed as this. So it's nice to have it all written down there. And it's nice to have the different names of the Carrion King. They did say this in a Facebook post. It was quite a while ago, actually, when they announced Carrion Empire, like his different names. But it's nice to have them in the book as well. Unfortunately, when I saw that post they did on Facebook, and I also talked about it in the video back then when the Carrion Empire first came out, I thought maybe we're going to get a Carrion King model. However, we're not, and that's also reflected in the lore as well, because the Carrion King, you know, is he still alive? Is he not still alive? Is he somewhere in the wilderness? We don't know, but Nagash very much still seeks him out. So yeah, that's cool. And it's nice to see how, you know, there was many wars between him and the Mortarchs, and it's nice to have that, you know, like evidence and shown here, which is, you know, really cool and really sort of adds to the fact that, you know, like named characters in Age of Sigmar compared to what they're like in, you know, Warhammer Fantasy, because Warhammer Fantasy is obviously was a lot older and had so much time to build on these characters. They really, really felt like a lot of depth to them. And in Age of Sigmar, the named characters, apart from the ones that carry over like Nagash and, like Scarbrand and people like that, that's fair enough to this, an attachment there. But for the new named characters, it doesn't really feel much, you can feel like you can attach to it. Like for me, with who has the most new character, probably obviously the Stormcast. And it's like, I'm not a Stormcast player, and you guys know that I despise Stormcast, so I'm going to be very biased when I say this. But I don't feel like I, get attached to them. There's so many like brand new name characters. You don't really care. It's how I'd say, like the new character situation in Age of Sigmar, because obviously it takes time to build on them. Of course it does. But as it's a little bit abstract anyway, the lore. But if you were to watch, like for example, I watch Game of Thrones. So because I've watched it from the start to, we're getting towards the end now. I've built up such a nice sort of like, emotional, sort of attachment to the characters in Game of Thrones, even the ones you don't like. If one of them dies, it suddenly feels like a big blow. You think, oh, that's a big shock. That's a huge reaction there. That's going to change things quite a bit. It means something to you when one of them dies or one of them achieves something. Whereas if you watch like an hour and a half film, like a brand new film of, it's not a carry-on, it's not a sequel, it's just brand new characters, it's a one-off film, I find it's quite hard in that time to attach yourself to those characters. And where this long rant is going, well, not a rant, but the long rumble is going on from and rambling and all that sort of thing, is it brings it back to comparing fantasy to Age of Sigmar. It feels like it's quite hard to attach yourself to those characters, but you need named characters in Age of Sigmar so you can build on them over time. And it's nice to see they're building on the Carrion King, as it gives something the Flesh Eater Courts to have a named figure around to like for them to they've descended from him rather than just being like a spawn of Nagash. So yeah, that's quite cool. And I know it's sort of because they were vampires from Neferata and then Neferata, but it's quite nice that they are uniquely their own thing. Okay, and then going on to the next part, it says the first court, which describes before his descent into madness, a court of knights and nobles followed Jucheron on his journeys, drawn from different corners of the realms. This court comprised the finest and most noble of warriors and their lords, and together they rode resplendent as glorious children of the night. Some were peerless statesmen, entrusted by their liege to impart chivalry to the kingdoms to which they travelled. Others were mighty warlords, commanded to defend the meek and eradicate the unjust. These knights were still unshakably devoted to their king, even after he had been afflicted by Nagash's curse, fighting alongside him as he waged war throughout Shaiish. When the Mortarchs were sent to apprehend Jucheron, his court fought to the bitter end. Many died, others were scattered, yet even in defeat they remained loyal. Some believe it was the knights of the court that lured Sigmar towards the stronghold where their liege was imprisoned. Freed from the shroud cage, the Carrion King gathered those who had been his courtiers to his side, once more passing his insanity to them and making them the first court in his resurrected empire. Lord Marabroth took up his position of old as protector of the Carrion King, gathering elite Mordants to his ragged banner, sure no harm would again befall the sovereign. The swift and secretive Baron Gizzard commanded ghouls in great patrols around the borders of his lord's burgeoning lands, seeking out enemies who dared draw near and slaughtering any who let their guard down. These and others were the first of the Carrion King's cursed descendants, and they carved out a gruesome domain in Shaiish during the Age of Chaos before spreading out into the realms to found new courts of their own. Of this initial generation of abhorrence, little else is known. Their histories lost beneath a vile time and madness. It is said that some travel the realms as archregents and that others fight beside the Carrion King to this day. Okay, and that ends the history of the first court. Right guys, so in this video of course we explained, the lore, the Carrion King and what there is to him out there, and the beginnings of the flesh, because the beginnings of the Flesh Eater Courts rely on the Carrion King, to the point where the Carrion King did not exist, if you went back in history, you know, you got rid of him, flesh-eater courts would not be a thing. So it very much all depends. The flesh-eater court history is the Carrion King's history, is what I'm trying to say. So it's been interesting looking at that and diving into his lore. And with that, this is potentially going to be the last video that's just focused on lore. Let me know, guys, if you'd rather me keep on going through the battle tome, picking out chapters and talking about them and discussing them like I have been doing for the last 3 lore videos, including this one. But what I was going to do is now start to move on to their units, and this will be covering the lore for them. Talk about, you know, how to use them in game, you know, what their points, what battle role they are, you know, how to, you know, put them into a list essentially, and how to make the most of them. But of course, by talking about their lore. So it would be a video per unit for flesh-eater courts, and I do fully intend that. So obviously the videos will be a bit shorter, like this one's a little bit shorter. However, it will mean that I can give you my full and honest opinion about every unit in the flesh-eater courts and do them justice by talking about their lore as well. Obviously this is going to take quite a bit of time, as obviously I don't usually do 3 lore videos for every army, and you know, I'll be talking about more about the flesh-eater court lore individually. However, it will be very lovely and enjoyable to do. So let me know, guys, if you think this is okay as like the last big lore video, you know, the last video just dedicated purely in lore. Let me know that, guys. And basically, just because I think 3 videos, that's quite a bit. Like I said, if you like more, let me know. Otherwise, I'm going to move on to the units, but obviously I'll be talking about their lore as well. So yeah, guys, I think it's quite nice now to move on to the army as a whole. I think we've covered quite a lot of topics here, but like I say, let me know what you would like me to do. Right, guys, so like I say, it's a bit of a shorter one, this one, but you know, if you're watching this just when you came back from work or something like that, you're watching it today basically, should be able to squeeze it in before you go to bed. And yeah, guys, I hope you've enjoyed this video as always. If you have enjoyed it, please like, subscribe and comment down below, as that is all free to do, and it massively helps support me on a scale you can't even imagine. And yeah, loads of you guys have been doing that lately, as I've talked about in a lot of recent videos, and I can't thank you enough. It's been absolutely great, and it's been a great start to over 1,000 subscribers already. How I think I'm over 1,020 or something already, which is absolutely amazing. And that is all down to you guys. Absolutely fantastic. And I hope you're enjoying the lore for the flesh-eater court. Let me know your thoughts about the Carrion King as well, as it'd be great to hear them. And actually, guys, just had a change of thoughts. Instead of doing this is the last lore video, I'm actually going to do one more lore video, and that is going to be about the lore behind my own flesh-eater court army. And I'm going to explain to you guys how it came about, because I've got quite a bit of lore for them, and maybe it'll help you influence creating your own lore for your own courts. So I'm going to do that, maybe try and get that done for tomorrow for you, see how time plans out at work and all that sort of thing, try and do the best I can. And yes, guys, so with that in mind, I'm going to leave it there. I thank you so much for watching this. Please let me know down below the comments, you know, what you'd like to see, all those sorts of things, what you think of the Carrion King, and let me know. And thank you for watching this, and remember, until next time, Nagash is all, and all is one in Nagash.